Welcome to Cosmic Comics, Games and Collectibles, your zen of geekism. We carry comics old and new, magazines, toys, games like Pokemon, Magic, D&D. Want Godzilla, Ultraman, Star Trek, Ninja Turtles, Funko Pops? You'll find it all here. Shop our Cosmic Sound Room and pick up a record or two. Enjoy our Comic Coffee Lounge with a cup of Sasquatch coffee or a delicious menu item while geeking out over a super cool movie on our big screen. Come by and say hello to Maui. Cosmic Comic, Games and Collectibles. Superman loves us, and so will you.
And good afternoon, everybody. I am RJ Carter, Senior Managing Editor here at CriticalBlast.com, head honcho at Critical Blast Logistics, and pretty much the guy who cleans up everything at all the other Critical Blast arms of business that we have around here. And yeah, there actually are a few of them all operating under that same umbrella. Today, we have Crowd Thunder on here who not doing a comic book, but is doing a book. So it's a bit of a branching off from what we normally do. We're going to see how this works out. We have with us today Justin Knight, who is doing a book called NIVEN'S War. And Justin, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, this isn't your first book. So when I say that, you're just doing a book, this is not that kind of thing. You've been at this for a while, and you put out a number of other books.
Yeah.
What's your provenance on this? How long have you been at this? What have you got out there?
I've got 6 books out now. 5 of them are on Amazon, and one of them is a digital-only freebie for anyone that signs up for my mailing list. I did that because I've seen a lot of authors do short stories or novellas for their mailing list, which, don't get me wrong, is great. But I thought I want to do something a little different here. So I wrote the book, which turned out to be Wasteland Vigilante, one NaNoWriMo. I think it was NaNoWriMo 2019, and decided to have that little exclusive perk for anyone that joins the mailing list, because you won't find it anywhere else. That sounds a bit sales pitchy, but
yeah. Well, NaNoWriMo is it's a little gimmicky. I always felt like who's going to write a novel in a month, especially November when everybody's gearing up for Christmas. But
yeah,
people do it. They take the challenge.
Yeah. It's a strange month to do it in, I'll be honest, but it's a great challenge. But if you haven't got a good idea, then I think it's a tough one to go into, because Wasteland, I wrote it using the right into the dark method that Dean Wesley Smith pioneered, and I had some great days and I had some really tough days, but I ended up with I think it was a 52 or 53,000 word manuscript, and I was quite proud of myself for it.
So when you talk about writing into the dark, you don't have a summary. You just like words on page, and where do we go?
Yeah, because I think the way he pitched it in the book was you have a character and you put them in a situation, you stay in their head and go where the story goes. And I think in one day I almost had the first act down because of how cool it was to write that way. But again, there were some tough days. But I'm doing it again with the book I'm writing now, and it's a great method, I think.
It's yeah. My publisher always wants an outline first, and I'm like, I'll give you one, but because you want one, but there's no guarantee that it's going to be remotely like the book when it comes out.
Yeah, because that's one of the arguments he makes, is that it's all well and good doing an outline, but the problem is you're going between creative and critical thinking of the brain, and the two don't mix. Because, I mean, I've looked at outlines in the past that I've written, and I've looked and gone, man, I didn't use half of this stuff, which is why I've switched to this method. I mean, I've spoken with my editor about it, because there's other books I want to write in the future, and he's gone to me, yeah, outline that. I think it'll be better if you do. So we'll see how that goes when I go further down the road.
You look at an old outline, you see half the stuff you didn't use. You're like, that's another book.
Yeah, that's happened as well, because I think it was Scott King. He wrote a book about his attempts to write a book in a week, and it's a horrible thing to do, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, because I ended up with a 35,000 word manuscript, and it was a pile of shit. and I ended up deleting it, but keeping a few plot points on a bit of paper, and I'm using those now.
You never know when a plot's going to come in. I sat on a science fiction novel for, gosh, 10 years, maybe more. It's like one of these days it's actually going to all come together and have all the pieces that I want. At the same time, I was still shopping around my, unknown stuff, trying to find publishers and make the name. And then finally, I got a break with a publisher who had a franchise character, the Remo Williams, the Destroyer stuff. And I was offered a chance to play in that little sandbox, and I'm like, oh, that science fiction novel that I've got everything plotted out for? I'm going to change some names. I'm going to alter the plot a little bit, and here we go. And it was a lot of fun. So glad to take that off. Will from Creators Outlets out in the chat here. Will, welcome to the show. Glad you're here, man. All right, so you've got a number of books out, and now you've led up to NIVEN'S War. And I'll be honest with you, the first thing I think of is Larry.
Yeah, a few people have said that to me.
Especially when it's a science fiction book. I'm like, okay, so why is he going to war with Larry Niven, or taking Larry Niven to war? Or so let's let's talk about who Niven is and what this war is, where it's at.
Well, first of all, the Niven is actually a nod to David Niven from Guns of Navarone. That's an old war movie I'd loved, and I was trying to. One thing I like to do is try and come up with unique titles that, for example, have a character's name in it, because obviously creating an original title for a book that you're going to have on Amazon can be a nightmare. So I thought, let's come up with something like that, and that's the result. And the book is about a military family that get caught up in a war between two continents on a distant human populated planet that reaches boiling point. And I had always wanted to write a military science fiction novel, but felt that the market was just too saturated with titles. So when I did decide I wanted to do it, I thought, how do I make it different? And the idea was just to sort of narrow the story on a group of people trying to survive in the middle of the conflict, rather than having multiple rooms of generals looking at, forces on a map going, move the force here, here, and here, and all that. So I thought it'd be more interesting to have the story focused on that way of going about it, because I thought it would be more involving.
And that's what the reader wants. They want to, they don't want to float over the whole war and see everything. And you get a lot of these omniscient point of view things with war stories. Put them in a person and carry them through. It's like Ender's Game comes to mind. For instance, when you're inside the young boy, the Ender character, and or one of his compatriots, which I really like, by the way. So it's dedicated, basically built off of David Niven. I know the guy because he was in Marathon Man with Dustin Hoffman. And the apocryphal story was that Dustin Hoffman he's a method actor. So if he puts himself through whatever it is that he's supposed to be portraying, and the scene the next day was supposed to be he'd been out up all night. He come in, he's supposed to be roughly shaven. He's supposed to be half out of it. So he stayed up all night and he didn't shave that morning, and he just kind of wandered onto the set. And there's David Niven, reclining in a seat, newspaper in hand, freshly shaven. He looks up at Dustin Hoffman, looks him up and down, and basically says, "My dear boy, you should really take up acting. It's quite easier."
I think that's Laurence Olivier.
Was it Laurence Olivier? I've heard the story.
Yeah, I know the story. Yeah, I know the story because I watched Dustin Hoffman on the Inside the Actor Studio, because the media had spun that Olivier didn't like working with him and had said you should just try acting, whereas that was originally what it was. But yeah, I know the story.
See, well, that's how these stories get, a game of telephone. It gets attributed to other people.
Yeah, but no, it like I said, I was just browsing through war movies because I thought I want to have a name that's been in a war movie as kind of like a slight nod, if you will, and because. Guns of Navarone, it had been, I think, a movie in my dad's collection. I come across it and I just focused on the name Niven for some reason, and it stuck with me.
Yeah, well, nothing wrong with that. So you have a character, obviously, named Niven. Who is he or she? Because I'm seeing a female character on the lead.
Yeah, it's a she. Her name is Amy Niven, and she is a fighter pilot. And the conflict in the book kicks off because of a mission she's sent on with her squad, and it goes very, very wrong, and the tensions escalate further as a result of that. And Amy, her dad is one of the generals on the base. Her mum is the head doctor, and she has an attitude, and it catches up with her in a way that, well, she can't escape, and it's a source of conflict throughout the book and what will be the next book.
Oh my gosh, that sounds like character growth, Justin.
I try.
That's something you don't quite get in characters these days, especially science fiction female characters who come perfectly out of the egg when they hatch.
Yeah, it's one of these debates on female characters that I've never fallen into, because I hear the strong female character tagline thrown around many places, but the thing is, I don't believe in strong characters of any gender, because that to me is a boring story.
Yeah.
If you give them something to overcome during the story, which in Amy's case is her attitude and moving on from the mistakes she makes, then she's got somewhere to go. I don't buy the whole strong female narrative in particular, because you look at some of the movies that have come out recently where they are advertised as strong female characters, and yeah, well, there you go, you've just done it there.
It's Mary Sue. It's
yeah, because I was literally talking about it with my other cover artist this morning, because there's that revelation with the Black Widow movie, the Taskmaster, even though it's revealed to be a woman in a gender swap role, it's a guy in the suit until they take off the hat, and you think, why? So yeah, I never bought into the whole strong female character narrative. My characters in any book that I do, they've got baggage, and in some cases I'll put them through the ringer because, well, it's fun.
Yeah, we don't really want a strong character. We want a resilient character, a valuable character, and a learning character. I don't know, a character capable of learning is what we want. Because if there's no change, then now, granted, you're playing with a franchise character. You can't change them too much, but you can change their opinion on something that maybe they had in the beginning, and now they're thinking differently about it. But so I've got the Indiegogo pulled up here. Normally, with an Indiegogo, I'll have a lot more to show because it'll be a graphic novel. There'll be pages and stuff. This one's a little different, but you do have some options on here. You've got the ebook, and you pretty much you've got the ebook and the paperback book. And then you got some Tuckerization options here.
Yes.
Which have all but one been taken. So
which is nice.
You might have to open some more of those up. I hope you have more characters that can be renamed.
Well, that one you've got your eye over now was actually one that I chose to add, because I looked at it and thought, man, I could have added more here, but I wasn't sure at the time. And when they all went with I think they all went on the first day, I sat and thought, is there any others that I can put in here? And I racked my brains and come up with one more. So I added that to see if anyone else would take it. So far, no one has yet, but I'm still blown away that the other three were taken as quick as they were.
Oh, people love to be mentioned in a book. I always kill my friends in the first chapter of any of my books.
I've done that with a few people I know.
All my books start with a murder. I'm like, okay, who's going to die today? And then I call them up and say, you died today. I'm like, yay. So you've only got you got a $688. This has been translated, obviously. 500 pound goal. You're at 207 pounds in, but it's flexible. You're doing this anyway. You're going to do it regardless. But you still got 49 days left. So that shouldn't have too much of an issue. Have you crowdfunded your previous books?
No, they've all been funded by my own pocket. The main reason I did this was, to be totally honest with you, I ran out of money for editing at the moment, because Wasteland, that was put out, I think it was March this year, and The Adventures of Herman Sims, which is my latest book, was launched, I think, last month, and I wanted to do another one and I didn't have the money to do it. So I thought, well, you know what? This is kind of new ground for me. I might as well make it more new ground and see if I can crowdfund it.
There you go. And it does have some graphic novel connections to it. We've got your covers by Carla Tornielli.
Yes.
Everybody loves from White Cat. So, and she did a bang up job on the cover.
Oh yeah. I'd missed what she'd done with the Grim Reaper, because the thing with crowdfunded comics, there's so many of them coming out now.
Yes.
But I ended up backing Sunsworn by Red Gaze on Indiegogo, and I did the perk to get the visual companion as well, which she did the cover for. And obviously, this is a visual companion, and and I saw it, and I love what she did with the sort of the picture here and the character's eyes. Oh god, there it is, not, and her face. And I thought, man, I want to work with her at some point. So I remember commenting about it with Red Gaze on Twitter, and I didn't realize she was in the thread at the time. And she commented saying, "Yeah, I'd love to work together." And I went, "Oh!" So we spoke, yeah, and we spoke privately and agreed a price and what I wanted, and away she went. And what she came up with is, as you see there, and I love it. I absolutely love it. And it was also
a lot of graphic novel artists. There's an art to cover art. Just because you can draw figures and you can do a comic book doesn't necessarily mean that you can put something marketable on a cover, because it's more than just usually it's more than just hey, here's a character holding a gun, or I'm in a sexy pose or something like the pinup covers you get on a comic book. There's science that goes into the design to make this look like a book. And this one looks like the cover of a book. It looks really good. Got Michael McCartney in the chat. He says he's one of the narcissists in the book. So
yes, he is, and I greatly appreciate his backing of it.
Thank you there, Michael. Hail RJ. Hail Justin from Pops Van Zant, whom I understood. I thought I was popping off with Pops this morning on a private chat. So I think you're coming up on his show sometime soon here too.
Yes, I am. So
you're making the rounds. You're doing your due diligence to get the word out there. And yeah, Pops, I will try to get Carla for Ladies Night. CromCon in 2 weeks. I'm hosting the final segment. I used to say the final hour, but hour was a misnomer because it could go on and on and on.
Yeah.
We just accidentally started to get all women for that segment. It's like, you know what? Let's just stick with that. We'll call it Ladies Night. We'll get nothing but women for it. So yeah, Carla would be good to bring in on there. We'll squeeze her in, make room. We got like 7 guests on that panel already. So you're looking at an April 2022 ship date on this one? Is that?
Yeah, I mean, this was after trouble with doing Indiegogo's because I wasn't sure what to put as my final sort of date. So I gave myself enough of a gap so that I could get it out there with any possible delays. But I mean, like I said before we started recording, the book is already written, and I've gone through the first round of edits on it. And my editor is aware of it. And I said to him that as soon as this is done, if I've got the required funds, I'll send it straight to you. So be ready. And he said, sure, no problem at all. So literally, I'll hit the ground running with this because I backed Blake Northcott's Kickstarter for the North Valley Grimoire. And she had already written the first draft of the manuscript. And I thought, you know what? I love that approach because it cuts down the delay. So that's the way I'm going to go with this.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got her Everglade Angels, and it was one of the
so have
fastest fulfilled books I've ever got.
Yeah, great book,
from back to finish. Yeah, she's not doing comics anymore.
I don't know what she's doing.
She's going into television and movies. So
okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, I tried to get her on the Ladies Night, and I went through her agent, and they're like, yeah, she's moving out of comics anyway. So
that's a shame.
Excuse me. I woke up this morning, the frog in my throat, as they say. Haven't been able to quite cough it out yet. So basically, this is going to be delivered as quickly as your editor can get through it. Corrections made and sent to the printer. So
yeah. Well, I'm using Amazon to print the books, which is why it's a lot cheaper than what you'll see anywhere else. Because thankfully, they do the thing now where you can get author copies of the book. Because a little tradition I have is I order a copy of every book that I write, so I have it on my desk as kind of like a little motivational thing. So thankfully, because Amazon do that, we can fulfill and keep the prices as low as we possibly can, and that's really helpful with crowdfunding situations like this.
Yeah, I did Critical Blast Publishing. We published books when we did. Gods and Services, the first book. We went through Amazon on that one. We switched over to Ingram Spark afterwards, just for ISBN and publishing name purposes. But with Gods and Services, it was like, I made sure that all the contributors got an author copy. And what I did was I ordered an author's copy through Amazon, and I provided their address in each one of them. So, I used Amazon to fulfill the book to the author.
Yeah.
And where I was going with that was I was wondering if you were going to use Amazon in a similar capacity to fulfill to the backers.
With the paperback copies, yes. With the digital, I use the BookFunnel service, which is where I distribute Wasteland Vigilante. And because BookFunnel it allows you to set up dedicated landing pages for events like this and for free books on mailing lists, it makes the distribution of digital copies so much easier.
I can imagine. And folks, the mailing list, by the way, is the first link you'll see here on the page when you're welcome to the campaign. So all you got to do is just click on it, like I'm doing here. And there you go. It takes you to BookFunnel.
There it is.
Wasteland Vigilante. Don't mind me while I just gaze at this cover for an hour or so.
Yeah, go for it.
No, I can't have a Tubin stream. Sorry.
No, that's the artist I usually work with, Peter, and she is fantastic, because when I finally decided what I was going to do with my stories, I said to her, the covers, I want you to do them like it's an 80s or 90s action movie poster.
Yeah.
And I said, with this one, give it a Barbarella style vibe, and that's what she come back with.
That's very cool. So once they're on here, how do they get to the mailing list? Is it to get my book?
Yeah, click on that.
That's the great big button. So
yep.
A lot of forms for people. And understand and send my book. So this is the free ebook that people get for signing up for the mailing list.
Yes.
Done and almost finished. I need to confirm my email address, which I'm not going to do on stream. But all right. So I'm going to have something to read later tonight.
Yeah.
While I'm in the middle of because of the website, the Critical Blast website, we do a lot of review stuff. So I've got there goes my sunlight. I got things I got to watch and review because they're expecting us to review DVDs. We will have reviews up shortly for the re-release of Almost Famous, which is out on Blu-ray. Pennyworth Season 2, which is out on Blu-ray, which I'm like, I didn't see Pennyworth Season 1, but I'm a big Batman fan, so I've got to get into it. CB Strike, which I did not know was a J.K. Rowling adventure before I said that I would commit to reviewing it. And this one I'm looking forward to, 1951 Flight to Mars, remastered and cleaned up and put on Blu-ray. That's going to be a lot of fun. I love the Atomic Age sci-fi stuff. So speaking of Atomic Age sci-fi stuff, where would you put the NIVEN'S War sci-fi level stuff at? I mean, if you were to compare it to another, to one of the sci-fi subgenres, is it Star Wars? Is it Atomic Age? Is it Ender's Game?
This is a tough one, actually. You've caught me out here. I've never thought about this. I call it near Star Wars, maybe, because one thing I decided to do when I was going to start writing science fiction was I didn't want to make it complicated science fiction. I didn't want to be, I think it's hard science fiction, they call it, where they tell you the ins and outs of every working thing in the story.
You get 15 pages of a Tom Clancy dissertation on how the laser beam works.
Yeah, I didn't want to do that. So if there's anything complicated in any of my science fiction books, I do my best to explain it as briefly as I possibly can, so that no one's left scratching their head, because I just don't like it. I think that level of detail is unnecessary, because in one of my earlier books, which I think I took down in the end, I looked on it one day and realized how crap it was, because I had literally one whole chapter dedicated to how a space station worked. And in the end, I remember looking and thinking, man, why did I write that? And I think the answer was I was really concerned with word length. And yeah,
padding.
yeah, which is a lesson I learned the hard way, because obviously that book's not on sale anymore. But I've made this little challenge to myself that I was going to rewrite it, because I think it was more for my own personal benefit than anything else. And I think I'd probably put it back out as a budget release, so that I could say I've done this. There you are, enjoy, and
Yeah.
that's off my palette, if you know what I mean.
I mean, there are people who really want to know, how does life on the space station work? I mean, what do they do with waste product? How do they eat? But if you just want to tell the adventure, then you don't want to get bogged down in all that detailed stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, I've got the original manuscripts over there somewhere, and I remember when I opened it up again, and once I'd finished cringing at it, I started chopping out bits and pieces that I thought I didn't need in. And the original book's word length was something like 84,000 words, I think. And by the time I was done chopping out what I knew should come out, it was about 62. So I looked at it and thought, man, I really did put some shit in this book. So that was a hard lesson learned for me with that sort of thing.
Well, you cleaned out a lot of space to put in good stuff.
That's what I'd like to think, yeah. But the biggest criticism I had with that book was a friend of mine when he said to me, I read this on my Kindle. The action doesn't start till about 70% into the book. And that was when the alarm bell started to ring in my head for that one.
Yeah. Yeah, you want the action to start like 7 lines in on the first page.
Yeah.
And that's why I kind of like books that start out in media res, where it's like, page 1, boom, explosion, things happen.
Yeah.
I really don't like it when it's like, when you get that whole record scratch kind of thing. You're probably wondering how I got here, because now guess what? The rest of the tension for the rest of the book is gone.
Yeah.
Because you know that no matter what they're going to encounter, nothing's going to happen to them because they're at the beginning of the book and you've been to the end already.
Yeah. Yeah, because with Wasteland, I think the action kicked off right at the end of the first chapter, and it didn't let up till about 5 or 6, maybe. I haven't looked at the book in a while. And with NIVEN'S War, the action kicks off in the second chapter, and I was quite proud of it, actually, that particular chapter, because it was a good bit of urban combat.
Do you have a formula? And it's different than a summary here, because we know what summaries are. But do you have a formula for plotting things out? And by that I mean, like, chapter 1 is going to be something like this. Chapter 2 is when this happens. Chapter 3, split back and forth between protagonists for this many chapters. And
off the top of my head, I don't think I do. My thing is, I grew up watching so many action movies of the 80s and 90s, sci-fi predominantly, that I suppose I just lent on a lot of how that storytelling went and how I'd done it, how I would do it if I was making a movie. Because I know that, again, learning from the earlier example of padding, I know that I don't want to waste time getting to the inciting incident, as it were, which, like I said, in NIVEN'S War is in chapter 2. And after that, the tension, I'd like to think, sort of slowly builds until the battle breaks out. And yeah, I don't know if I have a formula as such, because I tried the Save the Cat outlining method, because I did the course that Jessica Brody did for Udemy. And as much as I loved it, there were parts of the outline that I didn't like. So again, looking at the outline for NIVEN'S War, a lot of it I didn't use in the end.
How do you know when you've reached the end?
Again, it's a tough question. I suppose it's when I'm satisfied on a personal level, because I got to the end and I got to the end and I've chosen to end it. Well, no, I can't say that would spoil it. But I leant back in my chair and I thought, okay, I think I'm done with this now. And it's the biggest thing I've ever written. And when it got to that point where I was personally satisfied with it, I thought, okay, I think I can do this now. But that was before, obviously, I'd started doing all the rough revisions with the first draft so that it was as clean as I could make it to the editor.
Yeah.
But if I'm satisfied at a certain point, then I know I've reached a good ending. But again, I suppose it goes back to that first lesson of knowing padding when I see it. And now that I think I've learnt that lesson, hopefully the only way is up from here.
Yeah, it's you can tell when an author has learned the wrong lesson from padding. And if anybody wants to see an example of that, just compare the length of the first Harry Potter book to the last Harry Potter book. And it's like, whoa! It got a lot bigger.
The funny thing is, I've never read those books, so a lot of people make these comparisons to it, and it's funny because when people ask me what I'm doing, I say I'm an author, and they go, "Oh, so you'll be the next J.K. Rowling?" And I'm like, "No, she's properly published. I'm independently published. So if anything, I look up to the likes of Chris Fox, Adam Smith, and so forth, and even Lindsay Barocca, because they're great independent authors. So that's the sort of model I go near."
Well, plus, you're British and you're an author, so obviously you and J.K. Rowling and Neil Gaiman all go to the same pub and have drinks.
No, I don't. Yeah, I couldn't see that one happening because I do my best to stay out of politics and avoid the trap that a lot of authors set themselves by delving into that domain. Whereas Gaiman and Rowling, yeah, they really do, and I don't think it's a good idea for any author to do personally.
Not unless you're writing a political thriller. If the book is the politics, well, first of all, you've limited your audience, but it's doable. Yeah. It's doable. Anything is doable as an author.
But I choose to stay away from a lot of it. I think unless I've got an angle I can work it, a lot of this real world stuff, I think it's just best to stay away from at the moment.
The important thing is to be entertaining, and if you do a lot of real world stuff, you've locked your book into an era where only a certain amount of people are going to read it, and no certain amount of people live right now. They don't live next year, the year after, when this is suddenly old news. Like, look, this guy's writing about the COVID pandemic.
Yeah, that's this topic I think a lot of people should stay away from for a while. But I mean, I don't get me wrong. I don't mind parodying some things if I can, again, figure out a way to do it. But there's a lot of modern age stuff that we really need to stay away from at the moment. And God, I think everyone's tired of talking about COVID right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Bristolian Dave wants to be the next J.K. Rowling because, the money is nice.
Yeah.
Is she Lady Rowling yet?
I don't know. Because I don't watch a lot of the news nowadays because it's as you probably guessed, it's a very depressing thing right now. So I stay away from a lot of it. I know she has a habit of winding people up on Twitter, but I don't follow her. So again, I stay away from that.
Yeah, she and Jillian both have a habit of doing that. It's fun if you're like treating it as a spectator sport, but if you really have a vested interest in it, I can see where people get their blood boiling over it.
Yeah.
So how many things do you have on the back shelf? Your go-tos for when you get a book done. I mean, now that NIVEN'S War is just basically waiting for an editor to go through it, what are you typing on every night?
At the moment, I'm working on 2 books, both with the Writing into the Dark methods. I'm doing Furman Sims book 2 at the moment, which I was working on today before I come on here. And I've also started a science fiction disaster story, which I'm going to sort of pick out in between working on Furman Sims. The idea is if I run out of ideas for one, I'll work on the other and then jump back. So that's what I'm doing while I'm waiting for the editor. And I've got a couple of other series planned that I want to get to, but I've got to finish the Furman Sims series and also obviously finish any future books in the NIVEN'S War series and then go from there.
Okay. So now that's something to talk about too, is that this NIVEN'S War is a series. So it doesn't say book 1 on the cover, but it is book 1.
Yeah, it is book 1. I haven't properly outline the series because, again, I didn't want to be guilty of padding book series. Because there's one book series that I've recently finished, and it was 7 books. And I've looked at some of them and I thought, man, you could have cut this and that out and condensed it into 5 or maybe even 4 books. But again, I'm armchair expert here. So
Well,
I know that
it's either got to be 3 books, it's got to be 7 books, or it's got to be George R. R. Martin books.
Yeah. Well, no, the difference between me and Martin is I finish my books. But sorry, that was a cheap insult. But
That wasn't.
but at the moment, NIVEN'S War, in my head, it's 3 because I've got a rough story arc in there. But again, because I've switched to this writing into the dark method, anything goes right now. So we will see what happens with that. But I don't want to commit to saying it'll be 4 books or anything like that in case the story decides to wrap itself up sooner, because another reason I like writing into the dark is because, as Smith says in his book, you're emulating the reading process, and I really have come to cherish that idea. So I'm thinking a minimum of 3 books, but it depends how the story goes.
It's an interesting approach to the writing, to do that writing into the dark thing. I know that I read something years ago. You know, Neil Gaiman and Dave McKean had worked together on Sandman for years, and it was just Dave doing covers and Neil doing the in stuff. But at one point, they actually wrote something together, and it drove Dave nuts because Dave McKean was of the school of, you know, let's outline everything and, you know, have our ducks in a row and know where we're going with each chapter. And the word was that, like, Neil was like, okay, let's take these 3 guys and throw them on a stage and see what they do.
Yeah. Because one of the authors I wrote to growing up, this was before the days of email, was Terry Pratchett, and I asked him for writing advice. And my parents and I come back from a day trip to Calais, and he'd responded. We got the letter waiting for us.
Wow!
And I know, and I've still got it somewhere over there. It's a prized possession.
Yeah.
And one of the pieces of advice he gave me was, if your story gets stuck, have 2 characters start talking, because they'll tell you where it goes. And it got to the point writing Wasteland where I was stuck and 2 characters started talking, and next thing I knew, the next chapter was being written. So eternally, I'll always be grateful to him for writing that bit of advice on the letter, because I've used it countless times. But in Wasteland, when I look through it again, I can see the moment where I used it and think, man, thank God I wrote him that letter.
Yeah, that's I'm taking that advice to heart. You know, for me, it was for character development. Even before the book, I had this exercise where, you know, you sit down and you interview the character. This was more for graphic novels.
Yeah.
To understand your character, and it's just like, you know, hey, I've got a superhero, and, you know, his name's you know, Blue Scorpion, and people would say, well, what's he do? I'm like, I don't know. And I'd sit down and I'd write, here's Q&A with Blue Scorpion, and I'd start asking him questions, and I'd let him respond, and sometimes I'd learn things about the character that I didn't know. Now, I don't have a character, Blue Scorpion, that's an example. But yeah, your characters, it's weird. It's not to get too Grant Morrison on you, but it is almost like you're tapping through this multiversal vortex into a real other person, and they're telling you about themselves. Because it's like, that wasn't in me. Where did that come from?
Yeah, it's also interesting because I do draw on a lot of real life experiences, which I sort of put subtly in my books. And there is a particular arc with Amy's character in this, where another character who's dealing with her is expressing his frustrations with her about the way she's behaved in the past and the consequences that those actions have bore. And that was from something personal that had happened to me a little way before the book had been started writing it. And it's strangely therapeutic as well to draw in these examples. And I think I'll probably keep doing it because it's fascinating to see these things played out on page.
And there's a fine line too between drawing on your personal experience and putting yourself in the book.
Which I don't like doing. Anyone I think that does one of these self-insert characters, like we've seen with that I Am Not Starfire, which is blatantly the author.
Yes.
I look now and think, what the hell are you doing? And I think DC is starting to pick up on stuff like that, because they did a trailer reveal of it on Twitter today, and they turned off the comments.
Yeah, they didn't want to know what we thought about it. They just want us to buy it.
Yeah, which no way in hell I'm going to go near something like that. But then again, I'm not the target audience for these things, so what do I care?
I don't know who the target audience is, but you know what? It's going to work. People are going to buy it just to see how bad of a train wreck it is. Because they won't be able to review it otherwise.
I'd heard the similar story about, though, what was it? That new Marvel series, The New Warriors, which was written by Daniel Kibblesmith, and there were people saying, "I'm going to get it just to see how bad this is." Yeah. But by the looks of things, they cancelled it discreetly or saying, "I don't know." But I saw the video promotional material for that, and I was just sitting there going, "Oh my god!" Because I couldn't believe that not only had some guy had written this, but the fact that Marvel were publishing it.
Yeah, that was. I almost thought it was a joke when they had Snowflake and Safe Space, and I was like, this. Every other character on there, I'm like, okay, that's cringy, but these two characters, yeah, that's definitely a tell that they're not doing this.
Yeah, it's. I mean, the artist who I work with on my books, normally Peter, she and I have talked about doing our own graphic novel, and we've watched a lot of this along the way and think, man, let's make sure we never do anything as bad as this.
Yeah, as many science fiction tropes as there are out there, tachyon emissions, whatever the crystals are that fuel a lightsaber, none of them. There is no such thing, even in fiction, as internet gas. So. Let's.
Oh God, yeah. I still, like, again, I said, I still laugh at the fact that someone actually thought that was a good idea to publish. But it goes back to a conversation a friend and I were having about the DC Vertigo titles that they launched before it got shut down, and how bad some of them were. So it's no surprise to me that crowdfunded comics has taken off in the way that it is, because I think that Marvel and DC, and to some extent I think Image and IDW, are showing how not to do comics now, and it's such a shame.
It is. I lament often that I miss comics, and I just put up today. Obviously, we talked about. I put up a list of all the things I've crowdfunded. And picked up on crowdfunding. I like what I'm reading, but even so, I'm not crazy about spending $20 on each book.
No.
I miss the days of going and getting a 22-page complete story with a character in it, and then the next month getting that same character in another 22-page complete story that has nothing to do with the one I read before, and it will have nothing to do with the one I read next month after it. Other than, you'll see the same characters. There might be a subplot running under here. It's like, but it's not, I've got to read all 15 issues of this in a row to find out that nothing's going to happen.
Yeah. I mean, with my work, one thing I like to do is pay homage to the stuff that I grew up watching. I mean, Crush Depth was a homage to sci-fi horrors and underwater sci-fi, like Deep Star 6. Harem Knights trilogy was a nod towards a lot of the action science fiction movies I loved, and Furman Sims was a homage to my favorite comic book character, which was an old Marvel UK one called Death's Head.
I remember Death's Head.
Yeah, and my mum used to buy me the comics growing up until it got cancelled, and then Marvel killed him and replaced him with Death's Head 2, which was not the same character. And when they launched, they brought out What If 54, which was what if Death's Head 1 had lived in that fight with the Minion robot. And I remember looking at it one day and thinking, man, what if Death's Head had been a human being? And that was how Furman Sims come around. And the whole thing came full circle for me, because I met Simon Furman, the writer, at a convention, and he signed my copy of What If 54 for me, as you can see there.
Nice.
Yeah. So I have that on sitting above one of my pictures over here. So I always look at it. And Yeah, Deathstead was one of those characters they should never have killed off. So Furman for me was, what if Deathstead was human? And that's how I'm writing those books, with a sort of humor.
Well, no one ever dies in Marvel anyway, right? I mean,
No, because they did bring him back eventually for a 4-issue miniseries, and I did read it and think, okay, this is good. I'd give it 3 out of 5 because it kind of feels like Deathstead and Friends, when Deathstead was kind of a loner to me. So, but they brought him back, so I'm happy.
oh, cool. Well, is there anything more about NIVEN'S War we should know? We haven't talked about who she's at war against. I mean, is this an alien invading force, another country?
It's tough for me to answer that without spoiling it, but I'll say another country.
Okay, so we know it's sci-fi. We know it's the same planet. Is this a thing where it's like infantry, or there spaceship travel, or
there's spaceships, but there is also infantry, because I love the idea of urban combat, because again, the idea I had with doing a military science fiction novel was I didn't want the combat to be, on battlefields or anything like that, or majority in the sky. I thought, let's have it in familiar locations. So there's a tense scene at a fuel depot, and there's a gunfight across the shelving of a supermarket, and a destruction of a couple of buildings along the way, because I wanted it to be kind of a more personal story in that respect, because if it's in a location that people are familiar with, then maybe they'll sort of get taken in by it a bit more, was my logical thinking.
Yeah, it's and so much of the fighting that happens these days does, gone are the days where it's like, we're going to drag up old tensions here, but we're off to fight the British, boys. It's going to be held tomorrow afternoon in the valley just beyond the edge of town here, and they're all lined up ready for us. And it's like, you scheduled the battle. It's like, it's going to happen at this time. Secretaries came back and forth, said, we'll fight tomorrow, and then you lined up and you just kneeled down and shot. And then the next meeting, like now it's like, we're people are setting off IEDs in front of a Starbucks and then running. Yeah. It's much more urban and
because
scary.
Yeah, because I kind of got the idea from doing urban combat from watching Black Hawk Down, because that's, I think, is a great and of course modern example of urban combat because of where it took place and what the soldiers went through for it. So I suppose I tried to do my own sci-fi version of that to some extent.
Nothing wrong with that. It works. So folks, you can get this paperback for $14. You can get the ebook for $6, which is insanely cheap for an ebook of this size. Get the paperback. You want to hold it. I know I would. And if you're a woman, or you know a woman, or you think you're a woman, you can, for $41, you can have your female character name put into the book as a supporting character, who will presumably not die, but we're not making any promises.
Mm-hmm.
So Justin, is there anything more about NIVEN'S War that we should tell people before we wrap things up here?
The only thing I could think to mention is I've had people ask me about stretch goals. And to be honest with you, obviously with graphic novels, stretch goals are an easy thing to come up with. But with books, I struggled like hell. Yeah, it is. I struggled to think of any idea. Someone has said to me, will you do the audiobook? And I had to sort of say in the end, no, because audiobook narrators are not cheap. So if it makes over the target, and I think I can do it, anyone that backs book 1, be it ebook or paperback, they will get book 2 in the matching format, and it will be on me.
So wait a second, you say book 2, NIVEN'S War, they'll get...
Yes.
So if you fund, you're basically getting 2 books.
If it reaches a set point, I don't know what it'll be yet, but if it... I don't know, maybe £600 or £700. We'll see, because I don't want to sort of throw a concrete number out there.
Yeah,
but if it goes above the target, and I think I can do it, maybe put in a little more cash of my own, they'll get book 2 of the story in either paperback or ebook, whatever they backed before.
That's a very cool stretch goal, because you can still crowdfund it, and it'll go to the people who didn't back before. They can all get in on it. But at the same time, everybody who said, hey, number 2's up, I backed number 1 and we hit the stretch goal, so I should be getting my number 2 copy here soon.
Mm-hmm.
That's an incentive. Yeah. But you're right. It's difficult with books. I mean, what can you do? You can say, hey, if you hit this stretch goal, I'll send you a signed copy of this other book I did before. That's what some people have done, especially if they're trying to get rid of excess inventory laying around the house. I was like, look at this. But I don't know. You've got a character design, so maybe you could think of, oh, it's raining cats and dogs all of a sudden outside my window. You could get a 3D model, I guess, of Niven.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, the problem with doing this for the first time, I had loads of ideas for perks and stretch goals that I wanted to do. And I thought to myself in the end, you know what? I think I'll just focus on getting the book out first.
There you go. How about the book?
Because if it shows that I can get a product out, then maybe people will come back for the next one that I do and the next one that I do. Because, I mean, going back to the graphic novel that me and Peter have talked about, one of the perks that I've seen a lot of other folks, especially in CG, do is the sketch cards.
Yeah. And
I said to Peter, would you do sketch cards? And she said, yeah, no problem. So it's a trial and error process. But at the moment, the best thing I could think of for NIVEN'S will be book 2 as a stretch goal. And I'd literally start writing it as soon as I was able to.
Very cool. All right. Well, Justin, thank you so much for bringing NIVEN'S War to the channel today to show to our audience.
Thanks for having me on.
Folks in the chat, appreciate you being here as always. We don't have a show unless you're here. Would appreciate if you would hit the share button. If you didn't like it, don't hit the like. That's for you to decide. But share it just to get Justin's work out in front of more eyeballs in your social media circles. It's not for me. It's always about the guests. And I will remind you that we do have a membership level here. We're not creating comic books, so we don't have trading cards and all that stuff to give you. We do have these buttons. We have buttons, stickers, and keychains with the Critical Blast emblem on it. So if you want to be that big of a fan and have a keychain with our logo on it, go for it. We have only one level. It's the 99-cent a month level membership, and I kept it that way on purpose because we don't have cool trading cards or comic books yet. We might someday. We're keeping that option open. But anyway, thank you everyone for showing up. And as always, we just hope you had a blast.